There is a scene in Season 7, Episode 11 of Adventure Time called Stakes Part 6, Take Her Back, where Marceline is dying. She has been poisoned. Her body is shutting down, and Princess Bubblegum, who has spent most of the series presenting herself as the most rational, most controlled person in the room, falls apart. She does not fall apart loudly. She does not scream or cry or beg. She sits beside Marceline and talks to her quietly about nothing in particular. And the quietness is the thing that breaks you, because you can hear in the quietness everything Bubblegum will not say. You can hear the centuries of distance she put between them. You can hear the regret for every conversation that did not happen because she was too busy running a kingdom. You can hear the specific private terror of a person who spent 1,000 years building walls and is now watching the one person who made the walls feel pointless slip away on a couch. Marceline does not die. The show saves her, but the scene stays. It lingers in the way that real grief lingers, not because of what happened, but because of what almost happened. Because of how close the loss came, because of how clearly the almost loss revealed the things that were always there underneath the competence and the distance and the refusal to be vulnerable. That is the kind of sadness this show deals in, not the dramatic, operatic sadness of a character dying in a blaze of glory, the small sadness, the almost sadness, the sadness of realizing too late that you wasted time you cannot get back. Before we go any further, a quick note: if you enjoy essays like this one, subscribing helps the channel keep making them. It costs nothing and it takes about 3 seconds. Now, back to it. Adventure Time did not start sad. If you watch the first season, what you find is a show that is almost aggressively cheerful. Finn punches things, Jake stretches into funny shapes. The Candy Kingdom is pink and sweet and populated by citizens whose greatest crisis is usually whether to have a party. The pilot episode, which Pendleton Ward created in 2007 and which Nickelodeon passed on before Cartoon Network picked it up, is 7 minutes of pure absurdist energy. A boy and a dog fight a monster, save a princess, and ride off into the sunset. There is no sadness, there is no subtext, there is barely even a plot. The show that premiered on April 5th, 2010 was not meaningfully different. Season 1 is fun. It is inventive. It is weird in a way that no other show on Cartoon Network was weird at the time. But it is not sad. The sadness comes later, and it comes so gradually that you cannot point to a single episode where the shift happened. It is more like weather. One day you look up and realize the sky has been gray for a while, and you cannot remember the last time it was blue. The question is why? Why did a show that began as a joyful, irreverent comedy about a kid fighting monsters in a candy kingdom become one of the saddest animated series ever made? The answer is not singular. There are at least 5 reasons, and they overlap and reinforce each other in ways that make separating them nearly impossible. But they are worth trying to separate. Because understanding why Adventure Time got sad is, in a strange way, understanding why growing up is sad, and why the things you loved as a child become more complex and more painful the longer you carry them. The show's relationship with sadness is also visible in the way it handles music. Adventure Time is, for a cartoon about a boy and his dog, an extraordinarily musical show. Characters sing constantly. Original songs appear in dozens of episodes. And the songs, overwhelmingly, are sad. Not sad in the way that pop ballads are sad, performatively with big crescendos and dramatic key changes. Sad in the way that a person sitting alone with a guitar is sad. Quietly, without audience, without the expectation of being heard. Marceline is the show's primary musical voice, and her songs are almost uniformly about loss. I'm Just Your Problem, from What Was Missing, Season 3, Episode 10, is ostensibly a confrontation between Marceline and Bubblegum, but the lyrics describe the specific pain of being dismissed by someone you love. Everything Stays, from the Stakes miniseries, is a lullaby about the persistence of change, and its melody is so simple and so quietly devastating that it has become one of the most recognizable pieces of music the show produced. Rebecca Sugar wrote both of these songs, and her musical sensibility, folk-influenced, harmonically simple, melodically sticky, became the template for the show's emotional register. The genius of using music as the vehicle for the show's sadness is that music bypasses the analytical parts of your brain. You can watch a sad scene and intellectualize it. You can understand why a moment is supposed to be sad without actually feeling sad. But when the sad moment is accompanied by a melody, the melody gets into your body. It lodges somewhere beneath conscious thought. You hum it later, in the shower, on the way to work, and the humming brings the feeling back without the context. You are suddenly sad and you cannot quite remember why, and then the melody resolves and you remember Marceline. Ice King, a scrapbook, a 1,000-year-old song. And the sadness is fresh again, as fresh as the first time you heard it, because music does not decay the way memories do. Music stays. Time Adventure, the song that plays over the show's final montage, is written by Sugar even though she had left the show years earlier. She came back to write it because no one else could have written it. The song articulates the show's central thesis about grief, that the moments you shared with the people you lost are not gone. They exist permanently in the time where they happened. The past is not a place you have left. It is a place that still exists, running parallel to the present, and the people who were alive in it are still alive there. You cannot visit them, but knowing they are there, knowing that the moment is preserved somewhere in the structure of time, is offered as a kind of comfort. Whether this is actually comforting depends on you. The show does not insist. It offers the idea and lets you do with it what you will. But the melody carries the idea past your defenses, past your skepticism, past your reasonable objection that time is linear and the past is not literally preserved and the dead are not literally still alive somewhere. The melody says, yes, I know all of that. And listen anyway. Feel it anyway. Let the idea be true for the length of the song, even if you cannot believe it when the song is over. That is what music does in Adventure Time. It creates a space where the show's emotional truths can land without being intercepted by the viewer's rational defenses. It is the show's most powerful tool for generating sadness, because it is the tool that requires the least cooperation from the viewer. You do not have to understand the mythology. You do not have to remember the backstory. You do not have to track the relationships, or the timelines, or the thematic through lines. You just have to hear the melody, and the melody does the rest. The show uses this tool with remarkable restraint. Not every episode has a song. Not every emotional moment is musicalized. The show saves its music for the moments that need it most, which means that when a song does appear, you know you are in the presence of something the show considers important. The silence between songs is its own kind of communication. It says, the show could make you feel this at any moment. It is choosing not to. It is holding the music in reserve, the way a good storyteller holds the most important detail until the end. And when the music finally comes, the relief and the sadness arrive together, inseparable, like the first rain after a drought. Finn's relationship with music deserves its own consideration. Finn is not a musician in the way Marceline is. He does not play instruments, but he sings, casually, spontaneously, the way children sing, without self-consciousness or performance. In the early seasons, Finn's singing is joyful and silly. He makes up songs about fighting and treasure, and Jake being awesome. The songs are nonsense, and their nonsensicality is charming. They are the sounds of a kid who has not yet learned that the world has reasons to be quiet. In the later seasons, Finn sings less. When he does sing, the songs are different. They are shorter, softer, more likely to trail off mid-phrase as if Finn started singing out of habit and then remembered partway through that the song no longer fits. This diminishment of Finn's musical voice is never commented on by the show. No character says to Finn, "You used to sing more." But the absence of the singing is felt, the way any absence is felt, not as a presence but as a space where something used to be. And the space where Finn's songs used to be is one of the quietest, most understated expressions of sadness in the entire series. The role of color in the show's sadness is more important than it might initially appear. Adventure Time's color palette shifts noticeably across its run. The early seasons are saturated, bright pinks, vivid greens, intense blues. The colors are the visual equivalent of Finn's early enthusiasm, loud, confident, unambiguous. As the show matures, the palette becomes more muted. The shadows deepen. The backgrounds develop more texture and detail. The color begins to do emotional work that the dialogue does not. Puhoi, Season 5, Episode 16, is one of the earliest episodes to demonstrate this principle. Finn enters an alternate dimension made entirely of pillows, where he lives an entire life, growing old, marrying, having children, before returning to his own world as a young boy. The pillow dimension is rendered in softer, warmer colors than the rest of the show. The pinks are gentler. The whites are creamier. The entire visual register shifts towards something that feels like a fading memory, and the color palette alone tells you, before the story does, that this world is temporary, that the life Finn is living here will not last, that the warmth is borrowed. When Finn returns to the real world, the colors snap back to their normal intensity, and the contrast is jarring. The regular world, with its bold colors and sharp lines, feels colder after the pillow dimension's softness. And Finn has forgotten his other life almost immediately. A single tear rolls down his cheek, before the memory dissolves. But you have not forgotten. You remember the soft colors, you remember the warmth, and you carry the memory of a life that lasted decades and 11 minutes, a life that the character who lived it has already lost. The Music Hole, Season 7 episode 27, uses color differently. The episode features a sentient music hole, a being that exists in the ground and produces music from the resonance of the earth itself, and the scenes with the music hole are rendered in deeper, richer tones than the rest of the episode. The music hole's world is a world of depth and resonance, of sounds that have been traveling through the earth for centuries, of vibrations that carry the emotional residue of everything that has ever happened above ground. The color tells you that this place is old and deep and full of accumulated feeling. And the feeling is sad, because accumulated feeling in Adventure Time is always at least partially sad. The show's use of darkness, literal darkness, the absence of light, also becomes more sophisticated as it matures. Early episodes are brightly lit, even in nighttime scenes. The darkness is a suggestion rather than a reality. Later episodes allow genuine darkness into the frame. Characters are partially obscured by shadow. Backgrounds disappear into blackness. The visual space of the show contracts, forcing the characters into smaller, more claustrophobic compositions that reflect their emotional states. Catch Up, Season 9 Episode 2, alternates between two stories, one told in a bright, stylized art style, and one set in the real world of Ooo with its usual animation. The contrast between the two visual registers creates an unsettling effect, as if the show is reminding you that its visual world is a choice and that other choices are possible. The bright, stylized story is cheerful and funny. The real-world story is quieter and sadder, and the alternation between them reproduces in visual form the emotional experience of being an adult who can still access childlike joy but cannot sustain it. Who keeps falling back into the quieter, more complex register that adulthood demands. All of this visual work supports and deepens the show's emotional content without replacing it. Adventure Time is not a show that relies on visual tricks to generate emotion. It is a show that uses every tool at its disposal: writing, voice acting, music, color, composition, timing, to create emotional experiences that are more than the sum of their parts. The sadness you feel watching Adventure Time is not produced by any single element. It is produced by the convergence of all elements. By the way, the writing supports, the music supports, the color supports the voice acting, supports the composition. Each one reinforcing the others until the emotional impact becomes something that cannot be resisted because it is coming from every direction at once. This is why the show works as background listening, as a thing to fall asleep to. The sadness is not aggressive. It does not demand your attention. It simply exists in the audio, in the rhythms of the dialogue, in the melodies of the songs, in the tone of the voices. And it seeps in whether you are paying attention or not. You can close your eyes and the sadness finds you anyway, not through plot or spectacle, but through sound, through the texture of a voice that is carrying more than the words it is saying, through the melody that sits in a minor key when a major key would have been easier, through the silence between sentences that is just a half second longer than it needs to be, just long enough for the wait to settle. The way the show handles Jake is essential to understanding its sadness because Jake is the character who seems least affected by it. Jake is easygoing. Jake rolls with things. Jake does not overthink his emotions or spiral into existential dread. He stretches, he eats, he loves Lady Rainicorn, he goes on adventures with Finn, and he sleeps well at night. Jake is on the surface the least sad character in the entire show. But the show knows and gradually reveals that Jake's ease is not the absence of sadness. It is a particular way of carrying sadness. Jake's relaxed attitude is not naivety, it is philosophy. Jake has decided, consciously or unconsciously, that worrying about things you cannot control is a waste of the limited time you have. And that decision, which the show treats with great respect, is itself built on an awareness of mortality and loss, that Jake simply processes differently than Finn does. When Jake dreams about his own death in the new frontier and accepts it with equanimity, the show is not portraying Jake as shallow. It is portraying him as someone who has arrived at a kind of peace that Finn cannot access. Jake has made his peace with endings. He has made his peace with the fact that everything is temporary, including himself. And his peace is genuine. It is not performed. It is not fragile. It is not a mask over deeper anxiety. Jake has simply looked at the same truths that devastate Finn and decided to respond differently. This makes Jake both the least sad and the saddest character in the show, depending on how you look at it. He is the least sad because he does not suffer from the awareness of impermanence the way other characters do. But he is the saddest because his acceptance means he has already said goodbye to Finn, to Lady Rainicorn, to his life. He has said goodbye to everything, preemptively, and the premature farewell is what allows him to be fully present in every moment. He is not clinging to anything, because he has already released everything. And the release, while peaceful, is also a form of grief. It is grief that has been processed so thoroughly that it no longer looks like grief. It looks like ease. It looks like joy. But it is built on the same awareness of loss that drives Finn into depression and Marceline into isolation and Bubblegum into control. The show reveals this most clearly in Jake the Brick, Season 6, Episode 20, where Jake spends an entire episode sitting inside a brick wall narrating the events of the natural world around him. A bunny builds a dam. Rain falls, the dam breaks, the bunny is swept away by the flood, and Jake narrates all of this with the calm, attentive focus of a nature documentary host, observing the cycle of effort and destruction and renewal without judgment, without anxiety, without the need to intervene. The episode is beautiful. It is also, if you sit with it, profoundly melancholy. Jake is watching a creature pour its energy into building something that will be destroyed, and he is not sad about it, and his lack of sadness is the sadness, because Jake has generalized from the bunny situation to his own. He knows that everything he builds will also be destroyed. He knows that the treehouse, the relationships, the life he has constructed with Finn, all of it is a dam in a rainstorm. And he has decided to watch the dam with love and attention rather than grief, because grief would poison the watching, and the watching is the only thing that is actually his. He cannot stop the rain. He cannot save the dam. He can pay attention while the dam stands, and he can keep paying attention after it falls. And the attention is the gift, and the gift is enough. This is Jake's philosophy, and it is a genuinely wise philosophy, but it is a philosophy born from the same awareness that makes the rest of the show sadness. He is immersed in it. He has simply learned to breathe underwater. And the show respects this achievement while also showing you, through the contrast with Finn's struggle, that breathing underwater is not the same as being dry. Jake is wet. Jake has always been wet. He has just decided not to drown, and the decision, while admirable, does not change the fact that the water is there, everywhere, all the time, rising. The first reason Adventure Time got sad is that its characters grew up. Not metaphorically. Literally. Finn begins the show as a 12-year-old boy. By the end of the series, he is 17. And the show ages him in real time, roughly matching the years the show was on the air, which means that the audience watching Finn grow up was in many cases growing up alongside him. The kid who watched the premiere at age 10 was 16 by the finale, and both the character and the viewer arrived at the same destination, the realization that the world is not what you thought it was. Finn, at 12, is fearless. He runs into danger without hesitation. He sees the world in clear moral terms: good versus evil, right versus wrong, hero versus villain. His emotional range is excitement and more excitement. He does not doubt himself. He does not question his purpose. He wakes up every day knowing exactly who he is and exactly what he is supposed to do, and the simplicity of that knowledge is the source of all his joy. Finn at 15 is different. Season 5 and 6 Finn has been heartbroken. He has been rejected by Princess Bubblegum. He has been burned, literally, by Flame Princess. He has lost an arm. He has met his father and discovered that his father is a con artist who does not care about him. He has watched the Ice King and realized that the annoying villain he has been fighting for years is a good man trapped inside a disease. He has started to understand that the world does not operate on the principles he was raised to believe in. And this understanding does not liberate him, it flattens him. There is a stretch of episodes in Season 6 that fans sometimes call Finn's depression arc. It is not labeled as such by the show. The show does not use the word depression, but the behavioral pattern is unmistakable. Finn becomes listless. His enthusiasm dims. He goes through the motions of adventuring without the emotional engagement that used to define him. In Breezy, Season 6, Episode 6, he allows himself to be kissed by multiple princesses in a single episode. Not out of desire, but out of a kind of numb passivity. He is not enjoying the attention. He is enduring it. And the distinction between those two things is one of the saddest distinctions the show ever draws. What makes this arc so effective is that the show does not treat Finn's sadness as a problem to be solved. In most children's media, a sad protagonist gets an episode, maybe two, to process their feelings before bouncing back to normal. Adventure Time gives Finn an entire season. His sadness is not resolved by a single conversation or a single victory or a single friend showing up at the right moment with the right words. His sadness lifts gradually, incrementally, the way real sadness lifts, Not with a click, but with a slow, almost imperceptible brightening that you only notice in retrospect. By season 8, Finn has recovered. But the recovery is not a return to the Finn of season 1. The recovery is a new Finn, a quieter Finn, a Finn who smiles less frequently but means it more. The joy that defined early Finn was the joy of innocence. The quieter contentment of late Finn is the satisfaction of someone who has been through something and survived it, and no longer needs the world to be simple in order to be worth living in. And the distance between those two emotional states, between innocent joy and earned contentment, is the emotional distance the show covers across its 10 seasons. It is the distance of growing up. And it is sad, not because the contentment is worse than the joy, but because the joy, once lost, cannot be recovered. You cannot unknow the things that took it from you. This is mirrored in the show's treatment of Finn's voice. Jeremy Shada, the actor who voices Finn, was 12 years old when the show premiered. His voice cracked and deepened across the seasons in real time, and the show made no effort to hide this. You can literally hear Finn growing up. The high-pitched, excitable boy of season 1 becomes the deeper, more measured teenager of season 9, and the vocal change carries emotional information that no script could replicate. When Finn says mathematical in season 1, it is a catchphrase, a burst of pure enthusiasm. When Finn says it in later seasons, and he uses it less and less frequently, there is something else underneath. A hesitation, a self-awareness, the recognition that the word belongs to a younger version of himself, and the younger version is gone, and the word no longer fits the person saying it. The show is aware of this. There are moments in the later seasons where the show deliberately references early Adventure Time, the catchphrases, the simple quests, the uncomplicated villains, and the references land not as nostalgia, but as elegy. The show is mourning its own past. It is mourning the version of itself that could be simple and bright and weightless, because it has become too honest to be those things anymore. And you, watching it, are mourning the same thing. You are mourning the version of yourself that could watch cartoons without thinking about what they meant. The version of yourself that could enjoy a story about a boy fighting monsters without wondering what the fighting costs him. That mutual mourning, the show mourning its past, the viewer mourning theirs, is the first and most fundamental source of Adventure Time's sadness. The show grew up with its audience, and growing up, the show discovered is an inherently melancholy process. Not because adulthood is worse than childhood, but because the transition between them requires leaving behind things that cannot be replaced. The fearlessness, the certainty, the ability to wake up and know without doubt that the world is good and your place in it is secure. Those things do not survive contact with experience, and their loss, however necessary, is always sad. The show's commitment to emotional continuity also means that its sadness is cumulative in a way that rewards rewatching. When you watch Adventure Time for the first time, many of its sad moments register as isolated events. You see Marceline cry, and you feel something. You see Finn lose his arm, and you feel something. You see the Lich transform into Sweet Pea, and you feel something. But on a rewatch, especially a rewatch that happens years later when you are older and have accumulated your own losses, the connections between these moments become visible. And the sadness, you realize that the episode where Ice King annoys Finn and Jake with his terrible fanfiction is not just a comedy episode. It is an episode about a man whose creative output is the distorted echo of a mind that used to be brilliant. And the comedy is built on the gap between what he could have written and what the crown allows him to write. You realize that the episode where BMO gets lost in the woods and befriends a bubble is not just a cute adventure. It is an episode about a being whose entire coping strategy for existential loneliness is the creation of friends who cannot leave because they were never real. This depth of sadness, the kind that reveals itself only on repeated exposure, is a structural achievement that very few shows in any medium have accomplished. Most sad shows are sad on first viewing and less sad on rewatching, because the shock of the initial emotional impact diminishes with familiarity. Adventure Time works in reverse. It is sadder the second time, and the third, and the 10th, because each rewatch brings new knowledge, both from the show itself and from your own life, that adds new layers of meaning to scenes you thought you understood. A viewer who watches I Remember You at age 13 sees a sad episode about Ice King and Marceline. The same viewer, rewatching at 23 after watching a grandparent decline with dementia, sees something different. The same episode, the same words, the same animation, but the meaning has shifted because the viewer has shifted and the show was built with enough depth to accommodate that shift. Adventure Time is a show that gets sadder as you get older, because getting older gives you more context for its sadness, and the show has enough layers to absorb whatever context you bring to it. This is related to a quality that literary critics sometimes call inexhaustibility, the property of a great work that resists being fully understood, that keeps revealing new dimensions no matter how many times you engage with it. The Iliad is inexhaustible, Hamlet is inexhaustible, and Adventure Time, I would argue, belongs in that category, at least within the medium of animated television. Its sadness is inexhaustible because its sources are inexhaustible. There is always another layer, there is always another connection, there is always another way to read a scene you thought you had finished reading. The practical implication of this for the person lying in bed listening to this right now is simple. The show is still teaching you things. Even if you watched every episode years ago, even if you think you remember everything, the show has more to give you because you have changed since you last watched it, and the parts of the show that align with who you have become are different from the parts that align with who you used to be. The sadness you hear in this essay might not match the sadness you felt the first time you watched the show, and that is fine. That is the show working exactly as intended. The sadness adjusts to fit you. The sadness meets you where you are. And this is perhaps the most important thing to understand about why Adventure Time got sad. The sadness was never the point. The point was the truth. The sadness was a byproduct. And because the truth in question, the truth about growing up, about loss, about the impermanence of beautiful things, is inherently sad, the show became sad in the process of becoming honest. But the honesty is not exhausting in the way that relentless sadness would be exhausting. The honesty is restorative. It is the difference between being told a comfortable lie and being told an uncomfortable truth by someone who cares about you enough to tell it gently. Adventure Time tells its uncomfortable truths. Gently, that is the secret of its tone. It does not assault you with grief. It does not pile tragedy upon tragedy until you are numb. It mixes the grief with comedy, with absurdity, with genuine moments of joy and silliness and lightness. And the mixture is not a dilution. It is a more accurate representation of how sadness actually works. Sadness in real life is not a constant. It is a current running underneath everything else. You can be sad and laugh at a joke. You can be grieving and enjoy a meal. You can be heartbroken and still find, in the middle of the heartbreak, a moment of genuine delight in something small and unexpected. Adventure Time captures this mixture with a fidelity that more conventionally serious shows often miss, because serious shows tend to clear the room for sadness, to give grief its own dedicated space, when in reality, grief does not get its own space. Grief shares the room with everything else. Grief sits next to laughter. Grief eats dinner with the family. Grief watches cartoons. The show also understands that sadness is not uniform. There are different kinds of sadness, and they have different textures. And the show explores each one with a specificity that prevents the overall emotional experience from becoming monotonous. There is the sharp sadness of a sudden loss, which the show deploys sparingly and to great effect. There is the dull sadness of a chronic absence, which the show sustains across entire seasons through its treatment of Finn's parentage and Ice King's condition. There is the bittersweet sadness of a beautiful thing ending, which the show reaches in its finale. There is the ironic sadness of a funny thing that is also true, which the show trades in every time Ice King does something ridiculous that is also, underneath the ridiculousness, heartbreaking. Each of these textures of sadness requires a different approach from the viewer. The sharp sadness asks you to feel intensely for a short time. The chronic sadness asks you to hold a low-level ache across hundreds of episodes. The bittersweet sadness asks you to accept that endings are not failures. The ironic sadness asks you to laugh and ache simultaneously, which is the hardest emotional task the show sets for you, and the one it practices most frequently. The cumulative effect of experiencing all of these textures across 10 seasons is something like an emotional education. Adventure Time teaches you how to be sad, not how to avoid sadness or how to overcome sadness or how to transform sadness into something productive, how to be sad, how to sit with sadness, how to let sadness be present without letting it be everything, how to carry grief the way you carry a heavy bag. Not by pretending it is light, but by shifting the weight from one shoulder to the other, adjusting your grip, pausing to rest, and then picking it up again and continuing. That is what the show does. It picks up the weight and continues. For 10 seasons, for 283 episodes, for 8 years of real time, it carries the weight of its own mythology, the weight of its characters' accumulated losses, the weight of its audience's growing awareness that the show they loved as children is telling them something they need to hear as adults. And it carries all of this weight without complaint, without self-pity, without ever asking for sympathy. It just carries it. And the carrying, as the show has always insisted, is the point. The show's treatment of Simon Petrikov deserves special attention in any discussion of why Adventure Time got sad, because Simon's arc is where the show's sadness reaches its highest concentration. Simon is not a tragic character, in the way that characters in conventional tragedies are tragic. He does not have a fatal flaw. He does not make a catastrophic decision. He does not challenge the gods or overreach his station. Simon's tragedy is that he found a hat. He found an artifact in a Scandinavian marketplace, an old crown with red gems, and he put it on. That is it. That is the beginning, the middle, and the end of his downfall. He put on a hat. The arbitrariness of this is what makes it so unbearable. Simon did nothing wrong. He was not greedy. He was not ambitious. He was not tempted by power. He was a scholar who found an interesting object and did what scholars do. He examined it, and the examination destroyed him. Not quickly, not dramatically, but incrementally. Over what appears to be decades, as the crown ate away at his personality the way a disease eats away at a body. One piece at a time, one memory at a time, one relationship at a time, until there was nothing left of Simon except a shape, a voice, a set of behaviors that looked like a person but were not a person anymore. The show asks you to understand that this can happen, not in a fantasy world, in the real world. People lose their minds not because they deserve it, not because they made bad choices, not because the universe is punishing them. They lose their minds because the machinery of the brain is fragile, and sometimes the machinery breaks, and when it breaks, the person inside disappears. And the people who love them have to watch, have to stand beside the body that used to contain their friend, their father, their partner, and talk to it, and care for it, and mourn the person who is gone even though the body is still there. I Remember You is the episode where this parallel becomes explicit. Marceline knows who Simon was. She has the scrapbook, she has the memories. She remembers the man who saved her life during the Mushroom War, who sang to her, who kept her safe, who slowly, inexorably became someone else. And now she is sitting in a room with the someone else, and the someone else has no idea why she is crying. And the gap between his obliviousness and her grief is the Grand Canyon of the show's emotional landscape. Everything the show has ever been sad about, loss, change, the passage of time, the failure of love to prevent suffering, is contained in that gap. And the gap cannot be closed. That is the part that makes it truly devastating. The gap is permanent. Simon is not coming back. Ice King is not going to wake up one day and remember who he used to be. The crown has done its work, and the work is final, and Marceline has to live with the finality forever. Except the show does bring Simon back in the finale, and this complicates the sadness rather than resolving it. When Betty merges with Golb and the crown's power is broken, Simon's mind returns. He remembers everything. He remembers being Simon. He remembers being Ice King. He remembers the centuries of madness. And the show gives you exactly one scene of Simon restored. One scene of him looking around with clear eyes, recognizing his surroundings, understanding what happened to him, before cutting away to the rest of the finale's business. The scene is not triumphant, it is not joyful. Simon looks stunned. He looks like a person who has been asleep for a very long time and has woken up in a world he does not recognize. The woman who saved him is gone, absorbed into the cosmic entity that was the price of his restoration. The child he protected during the Mushroom War is an immortal vampire who has outlived entire civilizations. The world outside has changed so thoroughly that his knowledge of it is archaeological. Simon is back, but the world he belonged to is not. He is a man out of time, restored to a timeline that no longer has a place for him. This is sadder than if he had stayed as Ice King, and the show knows it. The show brings Simon back not to give you a happy ending, but to show you that some losses are so profound that even undoing them does not undo the damage. Simon's mind is restored, but his life is not. The 1,000 years he spent as Ice King are not. The relationships he could have had, the work he could have done, the life he could have lived, none of that comes back with his sanity. He gets his mind and loses everything else. And the exchange is presented not as a victory, but as a different kind of tragedy. The tragedy of getting what you wished for and discovering that the wish was too small for the scale of what was lost. The Simon arc is why people cry when they talk about Adventure Time. Not because of a single sad moment, but because of the accumulation of moments across 10 seasons that build Simon's tragedy into something monumental. Every Ice King episode contributes to it. Every flash of Simon's old personality, every moment of accidental lucidity, every time Ice King does something that echoes a behavior Simon might have had, all of these moments are bricks in a wall of sadness that the show built with patience and precision across its entire run. By the time the wall is complete, By the time you see the full shape of what happened to Simon Petrikov, you understand why the show got sad. It got sad because it was telling a story about a man who put on a hat, and the story needed 10 seasons to tell because the loss was that large. The second reason Adventure Time got sad is that its world has memory. Most animated series exist in a perpetual present. Episodes happen, conflicts resolve, and the next episode begins with the slate wiped clean. Characters do not remember their injuries. Relationships do not accumulate damage. The world does not carry scars. This is by design. It allows episodes to be aired in any order, it prevents viewers from getting lost, and it keeps the tone consistent. Adventure Time rejected this model almost from the beginning, and the rejection is the source of much of its emotional power. When Finn loses his arm in Escape from the Citadel, Season 6, Episode 1, the arm stays lost. He gets replacement arms across subsequent episodes, a flower arm, a thorn arm, a cybernetic arm, but the original arm is gone. The show does not forget this. Other characters reference it. Finn's fighting style changes. The grass sword, which caused the arm loss, continues to evolve as an entity with its own will. The injury becomes part of the show's ongoing narrative in a way that transforms it from a shocking moment into a permanent feature of the world. This commitment to consequence is what makes Adventure Time sad, because consequence is inherently sad. If actions do not have lasting effects, then nothing matters very much, and a world where nothing matters cannot generate real emotion. But if actions do have lasting effects, if losses accumulate, if relationships carry the weight of past failures, if the world remembers what happened to it, then the potential for sadness becomes enormous. Adventure Time chose the second model, and in doing so, it chose sadness as an inevitable feature of its storytelling. Consider the relationship between Marceline and the Ice King. In a show without memory, this relationship would be a single episode. The reveal that Ice King used to be Simon, the emotional beat of Marceline recognizing her old protector, and then the reset. Next episode, everything back to normal. Adventure Time does not do this. After I Remember You reveals their shared past, the show carries that revelation forward for the rest of the series. Finn and Jake now know that Ice King is Simon. Marceline now has to interact with Ice King knowing who he used to be. And the gap between who Simon was and who Ice King is becomes a permanent feature of the show's emotional landscape. A wound that does not heal because the cause of the wound is ongoing. Every time Ice King appears in a later episode, the sadness of I Remember You is present. You cannot unsee Simon behind Ice King's eyes. You cannot unhear the pain in Marceline's voice when she talks to him. The show has given you knowledge that changes every subsequent interaction, and that knowledge is, by its nature, sad. It is the sadness of knowing something you cannot change, of seeing something you cannot fix, of carrying an awareness that makes the world heavier without making it better. The show does this repeatedly across dozens of storylines. Once you learn that Bubblegum created Lemongrab and then abandoned him, every Lemongrab episode carries additional weight. Once you learn that Jake was born from an alien parasite, every lighthearted Jake episode has a shadow underneath it. Once you learn that the entire world of Ooo is built on the ruins of human civilization, every bright landscape and sunny meadow becomes a memorial to something that was destroyed. This accumulation of knowledge is what separates Adventure Time's sadness from the sadness of shows that deploy tearjerker episodes as standalone events. A show can make you cry with a single sad episode without being a sad show. What makes Adventure Time a sad show is that the sadness is structural. It is built into the way the show handles information. Every new piece of backstory makes the present heavier. Every revealed secret adds another layer of emotional weight to interactions that previously seemed light. The show's sadness is not contained in any single moment. It is distributed across the entire narrative, accumulating like sediment layer by layer, until you realize that the colorful world you have been watching for 10 seasons is, underneath it all, a graveyard. And the show's memory extends beyond individual character histories to the history of the world itself. Ooo remembers the Mushroom War. The ruins are everywhere. Broken bridges, crumbled buildings, radiation-scarred landscapes, artifacts from a dead civilization scattered across forests and deserts and ocean floors. The show treats these artifacts with a casualness that is itself a form of sadness. A character will walk past a rusted car or a collapsed highway overpass, and the show will not comment on it, will not zoom in, will not acknowledge the tragedy of what that object represents. It is just there, part of the scenery. The dead civilization is so thoroughly absorbed into the landscape that its remnants are barely noticeable anymore, and the fact that they are barely noticeable is, if you think about it, the saddest thing of all. because that is what happens to loss on a civilizational scale. It stops being loss and starts being landscape. The war that killed billions becomes a feature of the terrain. The cities that were destroyed become hills. The technology that was annihilated becomes fossils. And the world keeps going, cheerful and colorful and full of new life, growing on top of the old death like flowers on a battlefield. Adventure Time shows you this process, the slow conversion of catastrophe into scenery. And it does not editorialize. It does not tell you to feel sad about it. It just shows you the flowers and trusts you to remember the battle underneath. The show's treatment of Flame Princess is one of the clearest examples of how its mythology generates sadness through specificity. Flame Princess, whose real name is Phoebe, is introduced in Incendium, Season 3, Episode 26, as Finn's first serious romantic interest. She is beautiful. She is powerful. She is literally made of fire, and the show makes it immediately clear that Finn's attraction to her is going to cause him pain, because the physical reality of their difference, she burns, he does not, is a metaphor the show refuses to soften. Finn cannot touch Flame Princess without getting burned. Their first kiss leaves a mark on his face. Their dates require elaborate protective measures, and the show depicts all of this not as a charming obstacle to be overcome, but as a fundamental incompatibility that no amount of love can resolve. You watch Finn try, you watch him build fireproof suits and construct flame-retardant shelters, and devise increasingly elaborate workarounds for the basic problem that the person he loves is made of a substance that destroys him. And you realize, watching this, that the show is telling you something about love that most children's media will not touch. Sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes the person you want is the person you cannot have. Not because of circumstances or misunderstandings or evil parents, but because of what you are made of. Because the fundamental materials of your existence are incompatible with the fundamental materials of theirs. And no one is at fault. And the love is real. And it still does not work. The breakup, when it comes, is not caused by the physical incompatibility. It is caused by Finn's immaturity. He manipulates a fight between Flame Princess and Ice King in Frost and Fire, Season 5, Episode 30. Because he wants to see Flame Princess fight, because the fighting excites him, and he does not understand until too late that his excitement is coming at the cost of her trust. The breakup is about betrayal, not about fire. But the fire is always there underneath, reminding you that even if Finn had not made this mistake, even if he had been perfectly honest and perfectly patient, the relationship would still have been built on a foundation that was slowly burning. Flame Princess goes on to become one of the show's most interesting characters independent of Finn. She takes over the Fire Kingdom, she becomes a leader. And the show gives her this arc without ever resolving the romantic tension with Finn, which means that every time Flame Princess appears in a later episode, you feel two things simultaneously: pride in who she has become, and sadness for the relationship that could not survive what they were made of. The show lets both feelings exist. It does not resolve the tension. It lets the tension be the point. This refusal to resolve romantic tension extends to virtually every romantic relationship in the show. Finn and Bubblegum never get together. Finn and Huntress Wizard acknowledge their connection and then walk away from it. Jake and Lady Rainicorn are happy, but their happiness is complicated by the fact that their children grow up in a single day, and Jake is largely absent from their lives. Even Bubblegum and Marceline, the show's central love story, spend most of the series apart, and their reconciliation in the finale is presented not as a resolution, but as a beginning, the start of the hard work of being together, not the end of the hard work of getting together. The show's position on romantic love is essentially this: love is real, and love is not a destination. Love does not solve problems. Love does not complete you. Love does not end the story. Love is a condition you live inside. And the condition is sometimes wonderful and sometimes painful, and always complicated in the idea that finding the right person will make everything okay is the most persistent and most damaging myth in all of fiction. Adventure Time dismantles this myth systematically, relationship by relationship, across 10 seasons. And the dismantling is sad, because myths are comforting, and losing a comforting myth is always sad, even when the truth that replaces it is more useful and more honest. The show's handling of Princess Bubblegum is another key driver of its sadness, and the sadness operates on a different register than Simon's. Simon's sadness is the sadness of losing yourself. Bubblegum's sadness is the sadness of being yourself too completely, too rigidly, too competently, for so long that you lose the ability to be anything else. Bubblegum is brilliant. She is probably the most intelligent character in the show. She can create life She can manipulate matter at a molecular level. She can build weapons, design civilizations, cure diseases, reverse death. And the show gradually reveals that her brilliance is a cage, because when you can solve any problem, you start to believe that every problem has a solution. And when you believe every problem has a solution, you start to believe that finding the solution is your responsibility. And when finding the solution is your responsibility, you stop trusting anyone else to help. And when you stop trusting anyone else to help, you end up alone in a lab at 3 a.m, running the numbers on a threat that might not even be real, because the possibility of a threat is enough to keep you awake. Because you have taught yourself that sleeping is irresponsible, that resting is negligent, that any moment you spend not solving a problem is a moment in which the problem might get worse. The show does not frame Bubblegum as a villain for this. It does not even frame her as wrong, exactly. It frames her as a person whose greatest strength is also her greatest limitation, and the limitation is invisible to her because it looks identical to her strength. She cannot tell the difference between vigilance and paranoia. She cannot tell the difference between protection and a control. She cannot tell the difference between leadership and authoritarianism. And the show's sadness about Bubblegum is not that she is a bad person doing bad things. It is that she is a good person doing questionable things for genuinely good reasons. And the goodness of her reasons makes it impossible for her to see the harm in her methods. Her relationship with Marceline is the clearest window into this dynamic. Bubblegum loves Marceline. The show makes this explicit by the end, and strongly implied for years before that. But Bubblegum's love is conditioned by her need to control. She loves Marceline, but she loves the Candy Kingdom. More, or rather, she cannot separate her love for any individual from her sense of responsibility for the collective. She chose the kingdom over Marceline. She chose duty over connection. And the show reveals across many episodes that this choice damaged both of them in ways that neither has fully processed. Varmints, Season 7, Episode 2, is the episode where this damage becomes visible. Bubblegum and Marceline go on an adventure together, their first substantial interaction in a long time. And the subtext of the entire episode is the question of whether two people who hurt each other can become safe for each other again. They do not resolve this question about their feelings. They fight some varmints, they get muddy, they sit together at the end, and the silence between them is full of everything they are not saying. The sadness of Bubblegum and Marceline is the sadness of wasted time. They could have been together. They chose not to be. They chose responsibility and fear, and the comfortable distance of acquaintanceship over the terrifying vulnerability of intimacy. And the show's treatment of this, its refusal to rush the reconciliation, its insistence that trust is rebuilt slowly if it is rebuilt at all, mirrors the real experience of reconnecting with someone you loved and lost. It is not romantic. It is not cinematic. It is awkward and difficult and full of long pauses where neither person knows what to say, because the thing they want to say is too large for any sentence. When the kiss finally happens in the finale, it is earned. But earned does not mean painless. The kiss is shadowed by the knowledge of how long it took, by the centuries of avoidance, by the conversations that did not happen, by the version of their relationship that could have existed if either of them had been brave enough to choose it earlier. The kiss is a beginning, but it is a beginning that carries the weight of an ending. The ending of the period in which they were apart, which lasted so long that it became a defining feature of both their characters. They are people who were apart. They will always be people who were apart. The togetherness does not erase the apartness, it just adds another layer to it. This is a deeply sophisticated understanding of love and time, and it is one of the reasons the show became sad. Because a show that understands love this way, as something that carries its entire history with it, that cannot be separated from the hurt that surrounded it. That is always shadowed by the version of itself that did not happen. Cannot be consistently cheerful. The understanding itself is sad. Not depressing. Not nihilistic, but sad in the way that looking at an old photograph is sad, even when the photograph is of a happy moment. Sad because the moment is gone. Sad because you cannot go back. Sad because the person in the photograph is you, but also not you, because you have changed since then, and the changing is irreversible, and the irreversibility is the thing that makes the photograph beautiful, and the thing that makes it break your heart. And then there is the question of what it means for a children's show to be sad at all. This is not a trivial question. Children's media occupies a peculiar position in culture. It is expected to be fun. It is expected to be safe. It is expected to protect its audience from the full weight of reality, to filter the world through a lens that removes the sharpest edges and presents a version of existence that is manageable for young minds. Adventure Time violated these expectations systematically, and the violation is itself a source of its sadness, because the violation requires acknowledging that young minds are already in contact with the sharp edges. Children know about death, they know about abandonment, they know about loneliness and fear, and the specific terror of realizing that the adults in their lives are not as competent or as certain as they pretend to be. Children know these things because these things are unavoidable features of being alive, and no amount of bright animation and silly voices can prevent the knowledge from arriving. What most children's shows do is pretend. They pretend that the world is simpler than it is. They pretend that problems have solutions. They pretend that good wins, evil loses, and everyone is safe at the end. And these pretenses are not necessarily harmful. They can be aspirational. They can model a kind of optimism that children need in order to develop resilience. But they are pretenses, and children know they are pretenses. And the knowledge that the adults in their lives are pretending, that the stories they are being told are filtered versions of a reality they can already sense, creates its own kind of sadness. The sadness of being patronized, the sadness of knowing that you are being protected from something that has already found you. Adventure Time does not pretend, or rather, it pretends in the way that all fiction pretends. It creates a world that is not real and populates it with characters who do not exist. But it does not pretend about the emotional content of that world. The emotions are real. The sadness is real. The loss is real. And by presenting real emotions in a fictional context, the show gives its audience permission to feel things that other shows ask them to suppress. You are allowed to be sad here. You are allowed to be confused. You are allowed to feel things that do not have names, things that sit in the space between happiness and grief, things that resist the binary categories that children's media usually offers. This permission is paradoxically comforting. Being told the truth by a story you trust is more comforting than being told a lie, even if the truth is sad, because the truth validates your experience. The truth says, yes, the world is like this. Yes, people lose each other. Yes, growing up means leaving things behind. And yes, you are right to feel sad about it. You are not weak for feeling sad. You are not broken. You are paying attention. Adventure Time is a show for people who are paying attention. It always has been. Its humor rewards attentiveness. Its mythology rewards patience. Its emotional depth rewards the willingness to sit with discomfort rather than reaching for the remote. And its sadness, the deep, structural, accumulated sadness that builds across 10 seasons and 283 episodes, rewards the most difficult thing of all, the willingness to care about something that you know will end. Because the show does end. All shows end. All stories end. All people end. And the sadness of this, the universal, inescapable, irrefutable sadness of impermanence, is the foundation on which Adventure Time built everything. The comedy, the adventure, the friendship, the love, the strangeness, the beauty. All of it is built on the understanding that none of it will last, and all of it matters anyway, and the mattering is the miracle, and the miracle is enough. The third reason Adventure Time got sad is that its creator let it. Pendleton Ward, who created the show and served as showrunner for the first 5 seasons, has spoken in interviews about his own struggles with depression and anxiety. He has described the creative process of making Adventure Time as increasingly emotionally exhausting, and his departure from the showrunner position after season 5, he remained as a consultant, coincided with the period in which the show's sadness deepened most dramatically. This is not a coincidence, though the relationship is more complex than simple autobiography. Ward built Adventure Time as a show that could contain anything. The rules were loose. The tone could shift from absurdist comedy to genuine horror within a single episode. The world was big enough and strange enough that any story could be told within it. And the people who inherited the show after Ward stepped back, Adam Muto, who served as showrunner for the remaining seasons, and the team of writers and storyboard artists who shaped the show's later direction, used that freedom to push the show into emotional territory that Ward had opened the door to but had not fully explored. The storyboard-driven process of Adventure Time is crucial to understanding why the show got sad. Unlike most animated shows where scripts are written first and then handed to artists to animate, Adventure Time's episodes were largely created by storyboard artists who developed both the visual storytelling and the dialogue simultaneously. This meant that the emotional content of each episode was inseparable from its visual presentation. The sadness was not written and then illustrated. It was conceived as a visual emotional unit, and the artists who were given the freedom to create these units brought their own emotional experiences to the work. Rebecca Sugar, who worked on Adventure Time as a storyboard artist and songwriter from seasons 2 through 5 before leaving to create Steven Universe, is responsible for some of the show's most emotionally devastating moments. I Remember You, the Ice King and Marceline episode that fundamentally changed the show, was storyboarded by Sugar and Cole Sanchez. The song in that episode, Remember You, was written by Sugar. And the emotional specificity of that episode the way it captures the exact feeling of watching someone you love lose themselves, reflects Sugar's particular gift for translating internal emotional states into visual and musical form. Sugar's departure from the show after season 5 did not end the show's capacity for sadness. If anything, the show became sadder. But it became sad in a different way. Sugar's sadness was often musical, often romantic, often centered on the ache of connection and disconnection between two people. The sadness of the later seasons, guided by Muto and artists like Jesse Moynihan, Eiko Castuera, Hannah K. Neister, and Tom Herpich, was more existential. It was less about what people feel for each other and more about what it means to exist in a universe that does not care whether you exist or not. This shift is visible in the types of stories the show tells in its later seasons. Seasons 6 and 7 contain some of the most philosophically ambitious episodes in the series. Astral Plane, where Finn's consciousness drifts through the universe observing suffering he cannot alleviate. Germain, where Jake's brother has a quiet breakdown about inherited obligation. The Hall of Egress, where Finn is trapped in a reality loop that can only be escaped by surrendering the need to see what comes next. These are not episodes about relationships or conflicts. They are episodes about the human condition, and they approach their subjects with a directness that earlier seasons avoided. The show got sad, in part because the people making it got older. The artists who started working on Adventure Time in their 20s were in their 30s by the later seasons. They had experienced more, they had lost more. They had accumulated the specific kind of sadness that comes from living long enough to see patterns. The patterns of loss, of failure, of good intentions producing bad outcomes, of love being insufficient to prevent suffering. And they put that accumulated sadness into the show, not as a deliberate artistic statement, but as the natural expression of who they had become during the years they spent making it. Ward has said in a Reddit AMA from 2012 that he wanted Adventure Time to reflect how he actually felt about the world, not how he thought a cartoon was supposed to feel about the world. And what he felt, apparently, was a mixture of wonder and melancholy that the show captured with increasing precision as it matured. The wonder never left. Adventure Time remained inventive and surprising and weird until its final episode. But the melancholy deepened. The wonder became sadder. The invention became more emotionally freighted. And the show allowed this because the show was designed, from the beginning, to be honest. And honesty, as it turns out, is a pathway to sadness. This is an important distinction. Adventure Time did not decide to be sad. It decided to be honest. And honesty, applied consistently over 10 seasons, led inevitably to sadness because an honest account of growing up, of losing innocence, of discovering the complexity and cruelty and beauty of the world cannot avoid sadness. Sadness is where honesty leads. Not exclusively, honesty also leads to wonder and joy and absurdity and gratitude. But sadness is always there, underneath, because an honest look at life reveals that loss is woven into the fabric of experience so thoroughly that it cannot be separated out without losing the experience itself. There is also the question of what the show does with its secondary characters, the characters who exist at the margins of the story, who do not get full arcs, who appear for an episode or two and then vanish back into the background. In most shows, these characters are disposable, they serve a function, and then they are gone. Adventure Time treats them differently. It gives them just enough depth to make their disappearance noticeable, just enough specificity to make you wonder what happened to them after the camera moved on. Consider Shoko. Shoko appears in The Vault, Season 5, Episode 34, as one of Finn's past lives. She is a one-armed girl living in a pre-Candy Kingdom version of Ooo, and her story is told in a single episode as a memory that Finn accesses through meditation. Shoko is an orphan. She is taken in by a crime boss who uses her for thefts. She is sent to steal an amulet from a young princess Bubblegum, and in the process, she forms a genuine connection with Bubblegum, a connection that makes the betrayal of stealing the amulet even more painful. Shoko falls into a river of toxic waste after the theft and dies. Her body is absorbed into the landscape, and centuries later, the tree that grew from her remains becomes the foundation of Finn and Jake's treehouse. That last detail is the one that stays with you. Finn has been living inside a tree that grew from the body of his past life. His home is a monument to a death he does not remember. And the show reveals this in a single episode and then moves on, never returning to Shoko, never exploring the implications further, leaving the revelation sitting in the soil of the narrative like a seed that will never be watered. The sadness of this is not in Shoko's death, which is tragic but distant. The sadness is in the specificity of the connection, the fact that Finn's home grew from the body of someone who was, in a cosmic sense, him. The fact that every morning, when Finn climbs down the treehouse ladder, he is climbing down the remains of a girl who died alone and afraid, and far from anyone who cared about her. The show trusts you to make this connection. It does not underline it, it does not have Finn reflect on it. It just tells you the fact and lets you carry it. This approach, reveal, release, move on, is one of the show's signature emotional techniques. It tells you something devastating and then does not dwell on it. It does not give you time to process. It does not give you a cathartic scene where characters acknowledge the weight of what they have learned. It drops the weight on you and keeps walking. And you have to carry it by yourself, and the carrying is the experience the show wants you to have. Fern is another character who embodies this technique. Fern is a grass clone of Finn, created in Reboot Season 8 Episode 27, and his existence is sad on a level that the show barely scratches the surface of. Fern is Finn. He has Finn's memories, Finn's personality, Finn's desires, but he is not Finn. He is a copy, a version, a thing that looks like the original and feels like the original, but knows on some level that it is not the original. And this knowledge, the knowledge of being the derivative, of being someone else's echo, corrodes Fern from the inside. Fern wants to be Finn. He wants Finn's life, Finn's friends, Finn's place in the world. And the show gives you enough time with Fern to understand that his desire is not malicious. It is existential. He is asking the same question that anyone who has ever felt like a copy of someone else has asked. If I have the same memories and the same feelings and the same values, what makes me less real? What makes the original more valid than the copy? And the show does not answer this question. It lets Fern wrestle with it, and the wrestling destroys him. He becomes the Green Knight. He becomes a villain. He is eventually defeated and dies. And from his remains grows a new tree, a continuation, a transformation, a thing that is no longer Fern, but carries Fern's substance in a new form. The cycle of death and rebirth, of loss and transformation, of endings that are also beginnings. This is the pattern that Adventure Time returns to again and again, and it is the deepest source of the show's sadness. Because the pattern means that nothing is ever truly lost, and nothing is ever truly kept. Everything changes. Everything becomes something else. The people you love become memories. The memories become stories. The stories become songs. And the songs are beautiful, and the songs are sad. And the beauty and the sadness are the same thing viewed from different angles. The show handles death with a specificity that extends to characters you might not expect. In Lemon Hope, Season 5 episodes 50 and 51, a two-part episode follows a young lemon child who has been freed from Lemongrab's tyranny and placed under Bubblegum's protection. Lemon Hope is given everything: education, shelter, opportunity, freedom. And he does not want any of it. He wants to wander, he wants to be alone, he wants to exist without obligation to anyone, including the people who saved him. Bubblegum needs Lemon Hope to return to the Lemon Kingdom and save his people. It is a classic heroic narrative. The chosen one must embrace his destiny and free the oppressed. But Lemon Hope refuses. He does not want to be a hero. He does not want to be responsible for anyone. And the show does something remarkable with this refusal. It respects it. Lemon Hope does eventually return and free the lemons, but not out of duty or heroism. He returns because he realizes he cannot truly be free until the obligation is discharged. His liberation requires the liberation of his people, not because he cares about them, but because the guilt of not caring weighs more than the effort of helping. The episode ends with a flash forward. Lemon Hope, old and weathered, walks through a ruined landscape. The Candy Kingdom is abandoned. The buildings are crumbling. The citizens are gone. Lemon Hope walks alone through the ruins of a civilization that no longer exists, and he finds a place to rest. And the episode ends, no explanation, no context for what happened to the kingdom, or where everyone went. Just an old man walking through ruins, choosing a spot to rest, and closing his eyes. This image predates the finale's flash forward by several seasons, and it carries a similar weight. It shows you the future, it shows you the ending, not the dramatic ending, the heroic ending, the ending with closure and meaning. The real ending, the one where everything you built falls apart, and the world keeps going, and someone walks through what is left and does not mourn because there is no one left to mourn for. And mourning requires an audience, and the audience is gone. The show introduces these images of futurity, these glimpses of how everything ends, with a casualness that is itself a kind of emotional violence. It does not prepare you. It does not warn you. It does not frame the flash forward as a dream sequence or an alternate timeline or a worst-case scenario. It presents it as fact. This is what will happen. This is where the story goes. And then it returns to the present, to the adventures, and the jokes and the candy people, and it expects you to keep watching, knowing what you now know about how it all ends. This technique, showing you the ending and then making you continue as if you had not seen it, is one of the most emotionally sophisticated things Adventure Time ever does. It replicates the actual experience of knowing that you will die. You know. You have always known. Every human who has ever lived has known that they are going to die. And you keep going anyway. You get out of bed, you eat breakfast, you go to work, you laugh at jokes. You fall in love, you do all of these things with the knowledge of your own ending sitting in the back of your mind like a passenger you cannot ask to leave. Adventure Time puts that passenger in the front seat and makes you ride with it. And the ride is still worth taking. The adventures are still lovable, the jokes are still funny, the beauty is still real. But the passenger is there, always reminding you that the ride has a destination, and the destination is the same for everyone, and no amount of adventure or love or heroism can change the route. The mythology also reveals its sadness through the concept of reincarnation, which the show introduces late in its run and which reframes everything that came before. Finn is a reincarnation. He has lived before, in different forms, in different eras. Shoko was one of his past lives. The comet was one of his past lives. The butterfly that appeared briefly in Astral Plane was, the show implies, connected to the same cosmic thread. The sadness of reincarnation in Adventure Time is different from the sadness of reincarnation in most fiction. In most fiction, reincarnation is comforting. It means you get another chance. It means death is not final. It means the person you were continues in some form, in some new body. Adventure Time presents reincarnation differently. In this show, reincarnation means you forget. Every time the cosmic thread takes a new form, the previous form's memories, relationships, and identity are erased. Finn does not remember being Shoko. He does not remember being a comet. He does not carry the wisdom of his past lives or the love of his past relationships. He starts from zero, every time, in a new body, in a new world, with no knowledge of who he used to be. This means that Finn's personality, his relationships, his love for Jake and Bubblegum and Marceline, all of these things are temporary, not just in the sense that they will end when Finn dies, but in the deeper sense that they will be erased when Finn is reborn. The next version of Finn will not remember Jake. The next version will not know about the adventures, the heartbreak, the loss, the growth. The next version will be someone entirely new, shaped by entirely new circumstances, carrying none of the weight that the current Finn has spent 10 seasons accumulating. And yet the current Finn, the Finn you know, the Finn you have watched grow up, matters. His specific life, his specific loves, his specific sadness, these are not diminished by the fact that they will be forgotten. They are made more precious because if the cosmic cycle erases everything, then the only time these experiences exist is now. The only time Finn and Jake's friendship is real is right now, in this particular incarnation, in this particular corner of a universe that is constantly recycling its consciousness into new forms. The show arrives at this insight without ever stating it as such. It simply gives you the facts. Finn is a reincarnation, the previous lives are forgotten, the current life is temporary, and lets you draw the conclusion yourself. And the conclusion, once you draw it, changes the way you watch the entire show. Every moment of joy becomes more valuable because it is unrepeatable. Every moment of connection becomes more precious because it exists only in the specific arrangement of atoms and consciousness, an arrangement that will never occur again, not in any of the infinite lifetimes the cosmic thread will live. This is the deepest level of Adventure Time sadness. It is not the sadness of a particular loss or a particular failure. It is the sadness of impermanence itself, the sadness that exists at the foundation of conscious experience. You are alive, and the aliveness is temporary, and the temporary is the thing that makes it matter. The show understood this, and the understanding made it sad, and the sadness made it beautiful. And the beauty was always the point. The fourth reason Adventure Time got sad is that it chose to take its mythology seriously. The early seasons of the show treated the world of Ooo as a playground. The backstory was loose and flexible. Characters appeared and disappeared without explanation. The rules of the world changed from episode to episode. This looseness was part of the show's charm. It gave the writers freedom to do anything, and anything included a lot of very funny, very inventive, very weird storytelling that could not have existed in a more structured show. But sometime around season 3, the show began building a mythology. It started connecting episodes to each other. It started planting seeds that would not bear fruit for seasons. It started treating its world as a place with a history that mattered with rules that were consistent with consequences that accumulated. And as the mythology deepened, the sadness deepened with it, because the things the mythology revealed were almost without exception sad. The history of Wu is a history of loss, the Mushroom War, the near extinction of humanity, the mutation of survivors into new species, the rise and fall of civilizations built on the ashes of the old world. Every layer of history the show uncovers adds another stratum of grief to the foundation the story is built on. And because the show takes its mythology seriously, because the history is consistent and the revelations fit together like pieces of a puzzle, the grief feels real. It is not arbitrary sadness generated by a writer who wants you to cry. It is structural sadness emerging from a world that the show has built with enough care and consistency to support real emotional weight. The Lich is the clearest example of this. The Lich is introduced in His Hero, Season 1, Episode 25, as a fairly standard cartoon villain, an ancient evil that wants to destroy all life. But as the show's mythology develops, the Lich becomes something more. He is revealed to be a direct product of the Mushroom War, a being created by the nuclear blast that ended human civilization. He is not evil by choice, he is evil by origin. He is the living embodiment of the destructive impulse that created him, and his desire to end all life is not a plan, but a nature. He cannot be reasoned with because reasoning requires a mind that wants something other than annihilation. And the Lich's mind is annihilation. He is the bomb given consciousness. He is the war given a voice. And everything he does in the series, his attempts to destroy Wu, his manipulation of other characters, his patient, relentless pursuit of the end of all things, is an extension of the catastrophe that birthed him. The show's treatment of the Lich is sad not because the Lich is sympathetic, but because he is inevitable. He is what happens when a civilization destroys itself. He is the aftershock that keeps shaking. And his existence in the world of Wu means that the world carries its own destruction inside it, always, as a permanent feature of its landscape. Wu can never be fully safe, because the thing that threatens it is not an external enemy. It is a scar on the world itself, a wound that healed into a monster, a memory of self-destruction that refuses to stop replaying. And then the show does something with the Lich that is even sadder than making him the embodiment of nuclear holocaust. It redeems him. In Escape from the Citadel, the same episode where Finn loses his arm, the Lich is doused in the Citadel Guardian's healing blood and transformed into a giant baby. Sweet Pea, as the baby comes to be called, is adopted by Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig. He grows up as a gentle, kind child. And the show watches this child who is, on a cellular level, the incarnation of apocalyptic destruction, learn to be good, learn to be kind, learn to resist the voice inside him that whispers about ending everything. Sweet Pea's existence is one of the saddest and most hopeful ideas in the entire series. It suggests that destruction is not permanent, that the bomb can be diffused, that the worst thing a civilization ever did can be transformed through patience and love and the stubborn refusal to give up into something gentle. But it also suggests that the transformation is never complete. Sweet Pea hears the Lich's voice. He struggles with impulses he does not understand. He carries the weight of a catastrophe he did not cause, and the weight does not disappear just because he is loved. The bomb is diffused, but not dismantled. The war is over, but not forgotten. And the child who grew from the ashes still dreams, sometimes, of fire. The mythology also includes the Catalyst comets, cosmic entities that periodically slam into Wu and cause massive change. Finn is revealed to be the latest reincarnation of a Catalyst comet that has been cycling through the world for millennia, appearing as different beings in different eras. This revelation reframes Finn's entire existence. He is not just a boy, he is a cosmic force in a boy's body, experiencing mortality and confusion and heartbreak as part of an eternal cycle that he cannot remember and cannot escape. The sadness of this is not in the revelation itself, but in what it does to Finn's sense of self. Learning that you are part of a cosmic cycle does not make you feel cosmically important. It makes you feel cosmically small. It means your choices, the choices you thought were yours, the choices you thought mattered, are part of a pattern so large that your individual experience of them is almost irrelevant. Finn processes this the way Finn processes most things, by continuing to live as if his choices matter, even though he now has reason to believe they might not. And the show frames this decision, the decision to act as if free will exists in a universe that may be deterministic, as the bravest thing Finn ever does. Braver than fighting the Lich. Braver than facing his father. The quiet, daily bravery of choosing to care about outcomes when you have been shown that outcomes are predetermined. That is philosophy. That is Camus repackaged for Cartoon Network. The absurd hero rolling the boulder up the hill, knowing it will roll back down, choosing to push it anyway because the pushing is the point. And Adventure Time does not cite Camus. It does not reference existentialism. It does not pause to explain the philosophical framework it is operating within. It just shows you a boy who has learned that his life might be meaningless in a cosmic sense, and who keeps getting out of bed every morning anyway, and it trusts you to feel the weight of what that costs him. The Lich's transformation into Sweet Pea carries a particular kind of sadness that is unique in the show's mythology. It is the sadness of potential, of wondering whether the thing that destroyed the world might have been something else, if circumstances had been different. Sweet Pea is kind. Sweet Pea is gentle. Sweet Pea, who is literally the Lich, the embodiment of annihilation, the walking consequence of the Mushroom War, grows up in a loving home and becomes a person who cares about others. And this means that the destructive force that ended human civilization was not inherently evil. It was a force that became evil because of context, because of what happened to it, because of how it was shaped by the catastrophe that created it. This reframes the Mushroom War in a way that makes it sadder. It was not destiny, it was not the inevitable result of human nature. It was a choice, or a series of choices, made by people who could have chosen differently. And the consequences of those choices extended across centuries and transformed the very substance of evil into something that, under different conditions, could have been good. Sweet Pea is proof that the war did not have to happen. Sweet Pea is proof that the destruction was not necessary, and proof of unnecessary destruction is always sadder than proof of inevitable destruction. Because it means that the suffering could have been avoided, and it was not avoided, and the reasons it was not avoided are probably the same reasons that cause suffering in the real world. Fear, short-sightedness, the refusal to imagine alternatives. The show does not spell this out. It never delivers a lecture about the preventability of catastrophe. It just shows you a giant baby being raised by an elephant and a pig, learning to be kind, struggling with dark impulses he does not understand, and it trusts you to extrapolate from that image to the larger argument. The baby could have been a bomb. The bomb could have been a baby. The difference is love and patience, and the stubborn refusal to give up on something just because its origins are terrible. And that refusal, the refusal to give up, is both the show's most hopeful message and its saddest, because it implies that the world before the Mushroom War did give up. The world before the war looked at its worst impulses and chose not to fight them. And the result is the landscape of Ooo, beautiful and broken, magical and scarred, a world that should not exist, built on the ruins of a world that should not have ended. The cosmic owl is another mythological element that deepens the show's sadness. The cosmic owl appears in characters' dreams to signal that the dream is prophetic, a croak dream in the show's terminology, meaning a dream about death. The cosmic owl does not cause death, he merely appears in the dreams that predict it. He is a witness, not an agent, and the show uses him to create a specific kind of dread, the dread of inevitability. When the cosmic owl appears in a character's dream, the dream will come true. Not might, will. The future is fixed. The death is coming, and the character wakes up knowing this, and has to go about their day anyway. Jake encounters the cosmic owl in The New Frontier, Season 3, Episode 18, and dreams his own death, floating into the sky, peaceful, serene, resigned. And Jake's response to this vision is acceptance. He does not fight it, he does not try to prevent it. He tells Finn about it the way you might tell someone about a pleasant dream, and Finn spends the rest of the episode frantically trying to change the future, while Jake calmly waits for it. The episode resolves by suggesting that the dream was metaphorical rather than literal. Jake does not die at the end, but the cosmic owl was there, which means the dream is real, which means some version of the prophecy will come true eventually in some form. The death is postponed, not prevented, and the knowledge of this, the knowledge that Jake saw his own ending and accepted it, and the ending is still coming, somewhere out there in the future, waiting, colors every subsequent Jake episode with a faint, persistent undertone of anticipation. This is the kind of sadness that mythology enables. Without the mythology, without the cosmic owl, without the croak dreams, without the established rules about prophetic visions, Jake's dream would be just a dream, a metaphor, a one-off exploration of mortality that is contained within a single episode and does not bleed into the rest of the series. But because the show built a mythology that treats these dreams as real, Jake's death is now a structural feature of the narrative. It is present in every episode, even the funny ones, even the silly ones, even the ones where Jake is stretching into a giant foot and kicking a monster across a field. The silliness and the mortality coexist because the mythology demands it, and the coexistence is the sadness. The show also uses its mythology to explore the sadness of scale. There is a specific kind of sadness that comes from understanding how small you are in relation to the universe. And Adventure Time is one of the few shows that explores this sadness explicitly. Astral Plane, Season 6, Episode 25, is the episode that does this most directly. Finn's consciousness separates from his body and drifts through space. He observes different beings in different locations: Mr. Fox, Ice King, Marceline, a cosmic butterfly, and he cannot interact with any of them. He can only watch. He watches them struggle. He watches them suffer. He watches them experience moments of beauty and moments of pain, and he cannot help. He is powerless. He is a witness to suffering he cannot alleviate. And the witness position, the position of seeing clearly but being unable to act, is its own particular kind of agony. The episode ends with Finn watching a comet approach Earth. Finn does not know what the comet means. He does not know that it is connected to his own cosmic origins. He just watches it fall, a massive object on a trajectory that no one can change, heading toward a world that cannot defend against it. And the image, a boy's consciousness floating in the void, watching destruction approach in slow motion, unable to do anything but observe, is one of the purest expressions of existential sadness the show ever produced. This is the sadness of scale. The universe is enormous. You are small. The forces that shape your world operate on timescales and at magnitudes that make your individual experience almost irrelevant. And yet, your individual experience is the only one you have. It is the only lens through which you can perceive the enormous universe. And the gap between the smallness of your perception and the vastness of what you are perceiving is a gap that can never be closed. And the impossibility of closing it is sad. And the sadness is not something you chose. It is a structural feature of being conscious in a universe that does not require your consciousness to function. Adventure Time understands this kind of sadness and returns to it repeatedly. The catalyst, comets. The cosmic owl, the time room where Prismo exists. The nightosphere, Golb. These are all mythological elements that dwarf the show's characters, that make Finn and Jake and Bubblegum and Marceline look small by comparison, that remind you that the story you have been following for 10 seasons is taking place in a corner of a universe that extends far beyond the borders of the story. And the show does not use this scale to diminish its characters. It uses it to frame their significance differently. Finn is small. His problems are small. His adventures, in the context of cosmic comets and chaos deities, are barely noticeable. But the show argues, implicitly through the care it gives to every character's emotional experience, that smallness is not the same as insignificance. A small thing can matter enormously. A small kindness can echo across centuries. A small boy with a sword can change the trajectory of a world. And the sadness of being small does not negate the meaning of small actions. It makes the meaning sharper. It makes the choice to act, to help, to love, to persist more impressive because the choice is made in full awareness of its cosmic irrelevance. You help not because it changes the universe. You help because it changes the person in front of you. And that is enough. That has always been enough. This is the philosophy that runs underneath all of Adventure Time's sadness. The show is sad because it is honest, and honesty reveals sadness. But the show is also hopeful because the same honesty that reveals sadness also reveals that small acts of kindness and connection are genuinely meaningful, even in a universe that does not care. The sadness and the hope are not intention. They are the same insight viewed from two angles. The universe does not care, and you care anyway. And the caring matters precisely because the universe does not require it. The caring is a choice, a rebellion, a small act of defiance against the indifference of the cosmic void. And Adventure Time is a show about characters who make that choice, every day, without fanfare, without recognition, without cosmic reward. They care because caring is what they do, and the doing is the meaning, and the meaning is enough. The Lich, before his transformation into Sweet Pea, delivers a speech in Gold Stars, Season 6, Episode 26, that is one of the most chilling moments in any animated series. He speaks to Sweet Pea, to the child he used to be, or the child who grew from what he used to be, and the speech is about the end of everything. The Lich describes a universe without life, without light, without warmth. He describes the void that existed before existence, and that will exist after existence ends. And he describes this not as a threat, but as a fact, as something that is simply true regardless of what anyone does about it. The universe will end. Everything will be dark, and the darkness will not be sad, because there will be no one left to be sad about it. The speech is terrifying, because it is logically sound, the Lich is not wrong, the universe will eventually end. The darkness will come, and the darkness will be permanent. This is not mythology, this is physics. And the show puts this knowledge, this adult, scientific, philosophically devastating knowledge, into the mouth of a cartoon villain. And it does not soften it, and it does not refute it, and it does not offer a counterargument. It just lets the Lich speak, and then it shows you Sweet Pea, the child, listening, and the child is afraid, and the fear is completely justified. What the show does with this fear is what separates it from nihilism. The Lich is right about the universe ending, but the Lich is wrong about what that means. The Lich concludes from the fact of universal entropy that nothing matters. Adventure Time concludes from the same fact that everything matters. If the universe is temporary, then every moment inside it is precious. If darkness is inevitable, then the light that exists now is irreplaceable. If love will end, then the love that exists now is the most valuable thing in creation. The show and the Lich agree on the physics. They disagree on the philosophy. And the disagreement, the show's stubborn insistence that meaning can exist in a universe that is heading toward meaninglessness, is the heart of everything Adventure Time has ever been about. This philosophical stance, that meaning is created by the act of caring about things that will not last, is the source of the show's sadness and the source of its comfort. The sadness comes from the not lasting. The comfort comes from the caring. And the show holds both of these things, the sadness and the comfort, in a balance so precise that they become inseparable. You cannot feel the comfort without the sadness. You cannot feel the sadness without the comfort. They are the same emotion, viewed from different angles, and the ability to hold them simultaneously is the emotional skill that the show has been teaching you for 10 seasons. This is why people fall asleep to Adventure Time, not because it is boring, not because it is ambient, not because the voices are soothing, although they are. People fall asleep to Adventure Time because it provides the specific kind of emotional safety that allows sleep to happen. It tells you the truth about the world, the sad truth, the difficult truth, the truth that most media tries to protect you from. And then it stays with you afterward. It does not tell you the truth and walk away. It tells you the truth and sits beside you, the way Marceline sits beside Ice King, the way Jake sits beside Marceline. It stays. And the staying, the simple act of staying, is what makes sleep possible. Because you cannot sleep when you are afraid. You cannot sleep when you are alone. But you can sleep when someone is sitting beside you, telling you a story about a world that is broken and beautiful and sad. And the story does not end with everything being fixed. The story ends with someone choosing to stay. And the staying is enough. And you close your eyes, and the show keeps talking, gently, into the dark. The fifth reason Adventure Time got sad is the most fundamental one. It got sad because sadness is what happens when you pay attention. The show's sadness is not a stylistic choice. It is an epistemological one. Adventure Time is a show that pays very close attention to the world it has built, and the closer you pay attention to any world, real or fictional, the more sadness you find. This is true of the show's characters. The closer you look at Finn, the sadder he becomes. Surface level Finn is a hero who loves fighting and hanging out with his dog. Look a little closer, and you find a boy processing the absence of his parents. Look closer still, and you find a teenager struggling with depression and romantic failure. Look even closer, and you find a cosmic entity trapped in a mortal body, cycling through lives he cannot remember, making choices that may be predetermined, losing people he loves, to a passage of time he cannot stop. Each layer of attention reveals another layer of sadness, and the layers do not cancel each other out. They stack. This is true of the show's world. Surface level Ooo is a magical candy kingdom full of talking animals and silly adventures. Look closer, and you find a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Look closer still, and you find a civilization built on the rubble of a nuclear holocaust. Look even closer, and you find that the magical creatures populating this world are the mutated descendants of the radiation that killed the world before, which means that the joy and the beauty and the strangeness of Ooo are direct products of the worst thing that ever happened. The magic is the fallout. The wonder is the scar. The show understands this and does not look away. That refusal to look away is, ultimately, the source of all its sadness. Because looking away is how most storytelling manages its emotional intensity. You show the sad thing, and then you cut to something cheerful. You reveal the tragic backstory, and then you give the character a joke to lighten the mood. You build the mythology of loss, and then you reassure the audience that everything will be okay. Adventure Time does not do this, or rather, it does do this. It alternates between comedy and tragedy constantly, but it does not use the comedy to erase the tragedy. The comedy and the tragedy coexist. They occupy the same space. And the effect is not that one cancels the other, but that both become more intense by proximity. When Ice King does something funny in a later season, the comedy is funnier because you know the tragedy underneath. When BMO plays a silly game, the silliness is more poignant because you know BMO is filling a silence. When Finn shouts mathematical in a moment of triumph, the triumph is more bittersweet because you remember when that shout was effortless, and you can hear in the effort it now takes the weight of everything he has been through since. The show's sadness does not diminish its comedy, it enriches it, and the comedy in turn does not diminish the sadness. It makes the sadness livable. It gives you a way to be in the sadness without drowning in it. And that balance, the ability to be sad and funny at the same time, to hold both without dropping either, is the show's greatest technical achievement. There is a concept in Japanese aesthetics called mono no aware. It translates roughly as the sadness of things or the pathos of things. It refers to the bittersweet feeling you get when you perceive the transience of beauty, the falling cherry blossoms, the last light of a sunset, the sound of a loved one's voice that you know you will not hear forever. It is not grief, it is not depression. It is the specific emotion that arises when you are fully aware that a beautiful thing is temporary and that awareness makes the beauty more intense rather than less. Adventure Time is a show built on mono no aware. Every beautiful moment in the series is shadowed by the awareness that it will not last. Every friendship is shadowed by the knowledge that one of them will outlive the other. Every adventure is shadowed by the understanding that the adventure is getting older, and the adventures getting fewer. And the shadow does not make the show depressing, it makes the show truthful, because this is how beauty actually works. Beauty is not permanent. Beauty is a function of transience. The cherry blossoms are beautiful because they fall. The sunset is beautiful because it ends. And the cartoon about a boy and his dog is beautiful because the boy grows up and the dog eventually is gone. The show's final image, BMO, Ancient and Alone, telling stories about Finn and Jake to characters who never knew them, is the purest expression of this principle. BMO remembers. BMO carries the stories forward. And the act of telling the stories is both a victory over time and a concession to it. The stories survive, the people do not. The love is remembered, the lovers are gone. And BMO sits on a hill, centuries after the adventures ended, keeping the memory alive for people who will never fully understand what the memories mean. Because understanding requires having been there, and being there required being alive at a specific moment in time that is now irreversibly past. That is why Adventure Time got sad. Not because something went wrong, not because the writers made a mistake, not because the show lost its way. Adventure Time got sad because it was paying attention, because it was honest, because it understood that a world with memory is a world with grief, that a story with consequences is a story with loss, that characters who grow up are characters who leave things behind. The show got sad because life is sad, and the show refused to pretend otherwise, and the refusal, paradoxically, is what makes it one of the most comforting things you can fall asleep to. Because the show does not lie to you. It does not tell you that everything will be okay. It does not promise that loss can be avoided, or that grief can be skipped, or that growing up does not cost you anything. It tells you the truth. Everything ends, everyone leaves, the beautiful things are temporary. And then it tells you the other truth, the one that sits right beside the first one, inseparable from it, born from the same awareness. The beautiful things are temporary, and they are still beautiful. The loss is real, and the love was real too. The grief is permanent, and the moments that cause the grief are permanent in a different way, existing somewhere in the architecture of time, preserved by the same passage of time that carried them away from you. And then there is the question of the show's ending. The final episode, Come Along With Me, aired on September 3rd, 2018, and it is an ending that manages to be both conclusive and open, both satisfying and devastating, both an ending and a refusal to end. The episode wraps up the major plot threads. Goal is defeated. Betty merges with Galb to save Simon, sacrificing herself in the process. Simon is restored, his mind returns, the crown's influence lifts, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he is himself. But the cost of his restoration is the loss of the person who fought hardest to save him. Simon gets his sanity back and loses Betty. The universe, as Adventure Time has always insisted, does not give without taking. And the taking is always exactly proportional to the giving. Bubblegum and Marceline kiss. The moment is brief, tender, and unannounced. There is no dramatic build-up, no swelling music, no camera zoom. They simply kiss in the middle of a chaotic scene, as if they have been waiting to do this for a very long time, and the waiting has finally become less bearable than the fear of doing it. And the kiss is sad not because it is tragic, but because it took so long. Because two people who clearly loved each other spent centuries apart, and the reasons they spend centuries apart, Bubblegum's obsession with control, Marceline's fear of abandonment, are the same reasons real people spend years apart from people they love. The kiss is a victory, but it is a victory that highlights the waste that preceded it. All those years, all that distance, all those conversations that could have happened and did not. The finale's most powerful moment, though, is the flash forward. After the battle, after the resolutions, after the hugs and the tears and the kiss, the show jumps forward in time, 1,000 years forward. And what you see is Ooo, transformed. New buildings, new creatures, new civilizations. And at the center of it all, BMO, ancient BMO. BMO sitting on a hill, telling stories about Finn and Jake to a group of characters you have never seen before. The listeners do not know Finn and Jake. They never met them, they are hearing about them the way you hear about historical figures. As characters in a story, as names attached to deeds, as legends whose reality is impossible to verify. And BMO tells the stories anyway, with the same cheerful earnestness that BMO has always had, because BMO remembers. BMO is the last one who remembers. And the act of remembering is BMO's final gift to the people it loved, the preservation of their existence in a world that has moved on without them. This image, the last friend, sitting alone, telling stories about people who are no longer there, is the saddest and most beautiful image in the entire series. It is sad because it shows you the end of the story you spent 10 seasons investing in. Finn is gone. Jake is gone. Everything you cared about is gone. The world kept going, the way the world always keeps going, and the new world does not need the old one anymore. The stories are all that remain. But it is beautiful because the stories remain. Because BMO is there, still telling them, still keeping them alive, still refusing to let the people it loved disappear into the undifferentiated mass of history. BMO's storytelling is an act of resistance against forgetting. It is an assertion that these lives mattered, that these adventures meant something, that the love and the courage and the sadness and the silliness of Finn and Jake and Marceline and Bubblegum and Simon and BMO itself deserve to be remembered, even in a world that has no practical use for the memories. And then the show ends, the credits roll, the music plays, and you are left with the specific, complex, unresolvable feeling that Adventure Time has been training you to hold for 10 seasons. The simultaneous awareness that something beautiful is over and that its beauty is preserved in the fact of its ending. The show is gone, the show is still here. The characters are dead. The characters are still alive in every episode you can rewatch. The sadness is real. The sadness is the price of the love, and the love was worth the price does not make the sadness smaller. It makes the sadness mean something, and meaning, in the end, is all any of us get. There is a final layer to this, and it has to do with the audience. Adventure Time got sad in part because its audience needed it to be sad. The show premiered in 2010, and the children who watched it grow up during a period of extraordinary cultural anxiety. The 2008 financial crisis was still reverberating. Social media was transforming the way young people related to each other and to themselves. Climate change was becoming an increasingly urgent and visible threat. School shootings were becoming a recurring feature of the news cycle. The world that the audience was inheriting was by many measures more uncertain and more frightening than the world their parents had inherited. And into this context came a show about a boy in a post-apocalyptic world who keeps going, who keeps fighting, who keeps caring, who does not give up, even when giving up would be rational, even when the world he is trying to save is built on the ruins of a world that already failed. Finn is, in a very real sense, a metaphor for the generation that watched him. A generation that was handed a broken world and told to be cheerful about it. A generation that was expected to be resilient and optimistic and grateful in the face of evidence that the systems designed to protect them were failing. Adventure Time got sad because its audience was sad, and the show was honest enough to reflect that sadness back rather than offering false comfort. A less honest show would have stayed bright. A less honest show would have kept Finn at 12 forever, kept the adventures simple, kept the Candy Kingdom sweet. Adventure Time chose a different path. It chose to grow up with its audience, to match its emotional register to theirs, to say, I see what you are feeling. I see the fear and the uncertainty and the grief. And I am not going to pretend those things are not real. I am going to put them in the show. I am going to give them to characters you love. And I am going to show you that those characters, those sad, scared, uncertain characters, keep going anyway. Not because they are brave, not because they have a plan. Because they care about each other, because the connections they have built, imperfect and fragile as they are worth protecting. Because the alternative, giving up, stopping, letting the sadness win, is not actually an alternative. It is just the absence of trying. And trying, even when it hurts, even when it fails, is what makes a life a life. That is what Adventure Time gave its audience. Not answers, not solutions, not a promise that everything would be okay. It gave them a model of what it looks like to feel everything, the sadness and the joy and the fear and the love and the grief and the wonder, and keep going. To be sad and still laugh, to be scared and still act, to be heartbroken and still open your heart to the next person who might break it. The show modeled emotional courage, and it did so not through heroic speeches or dramatic sacrifices, but through the daily, unglamorous work of showing up, of paying attention, of caring about the person next to you even when caring costs more than you expected it to. The generation that grew up watching Adventure Time did not learn how to avoid sadness. They learned how to carry it. And the difference between those two lessons is the difference between a show that entertains and a show that matters. It will always matter, not because it was perfectly animated or brilliantly plotted or commercially successful, although it was all of those things. It matters because it was sad, and the sadness was honest, and the honesty was kind, and the kindness was real. There is one more dimension to the show's sadness that is worth exploring before we let this rest, and it is the sadness of the medium itself. Adventure Time is an animated show. It exists as drawings, the characters are not real, the world is not real. The emotions are generated by lines and colors and shapes moving across a screen, and the show knows this. It has always known this, and there are moments, scattered across the series, where the show seems to acknowledge the sadness of its own artificiality, the sadness of being a constructed thing, a made thing, a thing that exists only because people decided to make it and that will cease to exist when they stop. The show's art style changed across its run. The early seasons are drawn with a looseness and simplicity that matches the show's early tone. Characters are round and soft. Colors are bright. The lines are thick and confident. As the show matures, the art becomes more detailed, more varied, more willing to experiment with visual styles that disrupt the baseline aesthetic. Food Chain Season 6 Episode 7 is animated in a completely different style by the guest artist Masaaki Yuasa. A glitch is a glitch. Season 5 Episode 15 uses 3D animation that looks deliberately unsettling. Bad Jubies Season 7 Episode 36 uses stop-motion claymation. Each of these experiments is a reminder that the show's visual world is a choice, not a given. The characters could look different. The world could be drawn differently. The style you have grown accustomed to is not inherent to the story. It is a decision, and decisions can be changed, and the knowledge that they can be changed introduces a subtle instability into your relationship with the show's reality. This instability is its own kind of sadness. It reminds you that the world of Ooo, no matter how much you have invested in it, is not permanent in the way that real places are permanent. It exists because people are drawing it. When they stop drawing it, it stops existing. The characters you love are sustained by the labor of artists, and when the labor ends, when the show is canceled, when the final episode airs, when the artists move on to other projects, the characters are not in some other place living lives you cannot see. They are simply gone, frozen in the last frame that was ever drawn of them. And the love you feel for them has nowhere to go, no recipient, no address. It just sits in you, directed at something that is not there anymore, and the not-there-ness is permanent. Adventure Time seems aware of this, particularly in its final seasons. The show becomes increasingly self-referential, increasingly conscious of its own status as a show. Characters make comments about episodes ending. The narrative structure becomes more experimental, more willing to break the conventions that define the show's format. And these moments of self-awareness carry an undertone of valediction, as if the show is already beginning to say goodbye, already acknowledging that its time is limited, already preparing you for the ending that it knows is coming even if you do not. The Islands and Elements miniseries, which aired in seasons 8 and 9, feel like a show taking one last deep breath before the end. They are ambitious, sprawling, willing to risk confusion in pursuit of emotional depth. They push the mythology further than it has ever been pushed. They ask questions about identity and consciousness and the nature of reality that the show has been building toward for 7 seasons. And they answer some of those questions, which gives the series the closure it needs, while leaving others unanswered, which gives the series the openness it also needs. The combination of closure and openness, of things resolved and things left deliberately unresolved, is itself a form of sadness. It tells you that some questions do not have answers and that the questions without answers are often the most important ones, and that living with unanswered questions is one of the things that makes a life feel real. The show ends, but the questions remain. Why did the world destroy itself? Could it have been prevented? Was Bubblegum right to control their citizens? Was Finn's heroism a gift or a compulsion? Did Betty make a sacrifice or commit an act of obsessive self-destruction? Is immortality a blessing or a curse? Is sadness the price of love, or is love the reward for sadness? The show does not answer these questions because the show understands that answering them would be a form of dishonesty. The questions are the point, the sadness of not knowing is the point. And the willingness to sit with the not knowing, to resist the urge to simplify, to refuse the comfort of easy answers, that willingness is what makes Adventure Time great. Not just good, not just entertaining, not just a well-made cartoon about a boy and his dog. Great. Great in the way that the works that last are great. Not because they solve the problems they pose, but because they pose the problems with enough precision and enough compassion that the posing itself becomes a form of companionship. You are not alone with these questions. The show is asking them too, and asking them together, in the dark, falling asleep to the sound of someone else's wondering, is its own kind of comfort. And this is where we come back to that scene. Marceline is dying, Bubblegum is sitting beside her. The room is quiet, and in the quietness, you can hear everything the show has been building toward for 7 seasons. You can hear the weight of 1,000 years of friendship and distance and regret and love and refusal and fear. You can hear the specific sadness of a person who built walls and is now sitting beside the one person who made the walls feel pointless, watching that person slip away, and knowing with the kind of clarity that only comes too late, that the walls were never worth what they cost. Marceline lives, Bubblegum tells her something, the moment passes, and the show moves forward, the way it always does, into the next episode, the next adventure, the next small beautiful thing that will not last. But the scene stays. It stays the way real moments of almost lost stay. Not as a memory, exactly, but as a change in the texture of everything that comes after. Once you have sat beside someone and thought they might be gone, every subsequent moment with that person carries a different weight. The coffee you drink together the next morning is not just coffee. It is proof that the worst thing did not happen. It is evidence that you are still here, both of you, on the same side of an ending that almost came, but did not. Adventure Time got sad because it understood this. It understood that the almost losses are sometimes sadder than the actual losses, because the almost losses teach you the weight of what you almost lost, and then they give it back to you, and you have to carry it forward knowing what it weighs. The actual losses are devastating, but the almost losses are the ones that change how you hold everything else. And the show is full of almost losses. Simon almost surfaces inside Ice King. Finn almost gives up after losing his arm. The Candy Kingdom almost falls. Jake almost drifts away. BMO almost gets lost in the wilderness and never comes back. The world of Ooo almost ends, more than once. And each almost teaches you something about the value of the thing that almost went away. Each near miss calibrates your understanding of what matters. And by the end of the series, after 10 seasons of almost losses, you have been taught to value everything the show has given you with an intensity that would not have been possible without the threat of its removal. That is the mechanism of the show's sadness. It threatens to take things away from you so that you understand what they are worth. And then, usually, it does not take them away. It gives them back. It lets Marceline live. It lets Finn recover. It lets Bubblegum and Marceline find each other again. And the giving back, after the threat, is what creates the specific emotional register that Adventure Time occupies. Not happy, not sad, but both at once. Grateful and grieving, relieved and aware, holding the thing you almost lost and knowing forever after what its absence would have felt like. This is why the show works as something to fall asleep to, not despite its sadness, but because of it. Because the sadness is the honest kind. The kind that does not pretend. The kind that looks at you and says, I know the world is harder than you expected. I know the people you love will fail you sometimes. I know that growing up means losing things you cannot replace, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. I am going to sit beside you in the quiet and tell you a story about a boy and his dog, and the story will be sad because real stories are sad. And the sadness will be comforting because it will tell you that you are not the only one who feels this way. The show feels it too. The boy feels it too. The dog feels it too. And feeling it together in the dark is enough. The show aired its final episode on September 3rd, 2018. 283 episodes, 10 seasons, 8 years. And in those 8 years, It took a simple cartoon about a simple hero in a simple world and revealed, one layer at a time, that nothing was ever simple. The hero was complicated, the world was broken. The adventures were metaphors. And the sadness, the quiet, persistent, beautiful sadness that settled over the show like weather, was not a failure of tone. It was the tone. It was always the tone. You just had to pay attention long enough to hear it. If you enjoyed this, subscribing really does help more than you would think. Thank you for staying. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.